is my very great pleasure to welcome you all here to the session on data. We have had a little bit of a change in the program this morning. Unexpectedly, Sue Clery was called away for a family issue, and we very luckily were able to get my colleague Gina Johnson from NCHEMS to join us today to moderate the session. Did not have enough time, however, to add her picture to the panel. But she will be moderating the session for me today. And I really want to welcome her to this session. I want to welcome all of you as well. We're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about some things that we prepared with our panelists today, and then we'll be able to open it up to questions from the audience, from you all. So please hold your questions until the end, and we'll have an opportunity then to all talk together. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Gina.
Thanks, Emily. I'm very happy to be here. Was attending anyways, of course, as a close colleague of the Strong Start to Finish project. I am a senior associate at NCHEMS, and we are happy to be partners with the Strong Start to Finish program related to data. So this is the perfect one for me to be talking with you on and meeting with you on. We help analyze the data that's part of the Strong Start to Finish project from each of the scaling sites, and then help Strong Start to Finish and ECS staff develop some insights based on those analyses. So it's fun to be working with you all. And I'm going to turn to each of our panelists to introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll switch back in and we'll go into a brief presentation by each of them. So let's first just know kind of who we're talking to, what your names are, and where you're from. We'll start with Lindsay Koch.
Hi everyone, my name is Lindsay Cook, and I'm a research analyst at TBR, which is the College System of Tennessee. I am excited to be speaking with all of you today.
Thanks, Lindsay. And John Hetz.
Hi, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon for some of you. My name is John Hetz. I'm the visiting executive for research and data at the California Community College's Chancellor's Office.
Thanks, John. And Jill Lansing.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jill Lansing, the Assistant Vice Chancellor for the Education Pipeline in the Office of Community Colleges in the Education Pipeline at the State University of New York. Thanks for having us today.
Thanks, Lindsay, John, and Jill. And we're going to get started. We've asked each of the panelists to open it up by sharing, and they'll be using some slides, so we'll have some visuals to go along with it, to share briefly what's happening with Dev Ed reform in each of their systems, and then bringing it into data to talk about what kind of trends and progress that they're seeing right now towards their goals. So we're going to advance the slides and kick it off with the first piece.
Well, thank you so much. We're just so thrilled to be here today and happy to be part of the Strong Start to Finish initiative, as well as the work the Education Commission of the States has been doing for so long to really develop good policies and share best practices on this very important issue of implementing best practices to change the way that we approach developmental education and try to help support more students in gateway courses. The State University of New York is a 64 campus system that is made up of educational opportunities ranging from opportunities that take place in our education opportunity centers, all the way to our community colleges, to our technical colleges, our state operated campuses, and also our university centers. And in 2012, we actually started to take a look at the developmental education that our students were in at Suny, and really tried to transform that work to help to support more students in gateway course completion efforts. So we started our work back in 2012 under the leadership of our Senior Vice Chancellor, Johanna Duncan-Poitier, who put together a team of educators and business partners across the continuum to talk about how we could really try to crack the nut on developmental education reform. And that resulted in a remediation task force report that had a number of initiatives that we really tried to get a head start on to try to sort of solve the lag that students were having and the complexities and really dropout rates that we're experiencing from students being in developmental education, help them to get a good start in college. So we implemented a number of national best practices in collaboration with several of our partners. And in 2015, we started with the implementation of the Carnegie Math Pathways model to help students to be able to get the core skills that they would need to be successful in the math gateway courses. In 2015, we started with the AACC Guided Pathways reform effort And many of our campuses have taken the lead from our lead campus, Monroe Community College, to really implement guided pathways on their campuses. And then in 2017, we started with accelerating developmental English courses. And then now we are proud to be a part of the Strong Start to Finish network, which has really helped us to amplify our efforts. And the slide that you see on the screen really talks about an overall data point that we have related to graduation rates. So you can see the mark on the slide from 2012, before 2012 when we started, to 2017 data, which indicates that our graduation rates have been progressively on the rise for the first time in a long time. And we're really just happy to see the number of students graduating surpassing the national average at Suny. So I think as we go into the conversation, we can talk more about the different measures that add into that large picture, but it's very promising. And we heard yesterday from many of our partners at the Gates Foundation and others that this is a really important number to show the progress that we've been able to have as a result of partnerships with all of you. So just thank you for all of that work that you put into supporting us. And Emily, if you want to move on to the next slide. This presentation that we're having today is largely about COVID-19 and the impacts that it has had on us in the way of data collection and use. And we'll talk about that as we progress today. But one of the things that we'll see is I think there's a lot of challenges related to COVID-19, and there's a lot of influx nature of the way of data, especially since we can't rely on some of the data points that we've been able to use in the past for informing decision-making on our campuses related to student success. So we have to be able to be very nimble, but I think that we also have amazing opportunities, and we've seen a lot of success that has been the outcome of COVID-19. For example, students and teachers and faculty have become much more familiar and able to integrate technology into their coursework, and that's been happening at a pace like never before. So we need to take opportunities to accelerate progress in 2021 in a number of different areas. And at SUNY, we're looking at opportunities related to multiple measures. We've been talking about how to solve the placement challenges that we've been having for a long time, and I've had many work groups and task force. And then as a result of COVID-19, we actually have been routinely relying on multiple measures for making placement decisions at our community colleges, and that's really paying off. And so accelerating things like multiple measures, data sharing across K-12, higher education, and the workforce, I think that's going to be critical. We'll talk more about what that means in the presentation today. Equity inquiry and equity measures. The COVID-19 is exacerbating the equity crisis we've been having in higher education. And so we really need to focus in more on disaggregating our measures to help to improve our equity efforts across our campuses. Strengthen and expand the flexible and online learning experiences, and then also the same for holistic supports that we provide for students and also for faculty. I think in the coming years, as we look at more of the finite data points, we'll be seeing that we're really going to need to work with students, support them where they are, and they're coming into us now from multiple pathways, from multiple stop outs and gaps that they've been facing as a result of COVID-19. And so helping to support those students on many different levels and many different dimensions, but also supporting the faculty are really going to have to work with the students to develop the baseline skills that they need to be successful in gateway courses, because we don't want to go back to the remediation model. But we have to anticipate that students are going to be needing a little bit more support coming in the way of math and English that will be fundamental for their success in college. So a couple of the overarching principles of what we look forward to working on in 2021. So thank you, Gina.
Thanks, Jill. And Lindsay's next.
Hi again, everyone. I'm Lindsay Cook. Again, I'm a research analyst at TBR, which is the College System of Tennessee. We're also really excited to be talking with you today and for all of our work with Strong Start and ECS. I just wanted to start today by laying out the landscape a little bit to give some context for our conversation later. So within Tennessee, I'm at TBR, which is, like I said, the College System of Tennessee. It's an open access system of 13 community colleges and 27 technical colleges across the state. And we serve over 140,000 students per year. So in my role on the policy and strategy team, we support our academic and student success sides of the house by providing research and data analysis, hopefully so that those teams can turn those findings into actionable information. So for some sort of broad data context, since that's what our conversation today will focus on, in 2010, the Tennessee Higher Education Commission, which is our coordinating board, developed our outcomes-based funding formula for all of higher ed in Tennessee. This has dramatically improved the data we have about our students in higher ed in Tennessee. So I'm going to share a little bit of the types of data we see at our system office and some context for our project with Strong Start. So on this slide, I was just hoping to give some more background on our developmental ed reforms and their successes, as well as some broader guided pathways reforms at the system and a focus on completion in the last few years. So over the last decade, you can see here that gateway course completion rates like college level math have more than doubled. This is an example of the student level data we have on student course taking, course grades, course modality, things like high school GPA, et cetera. In terms of reforms, in 2012, higher ed and our K-12 partners came together to develop the SAILS program, which embeds learning support competencies into 12th grade math courses. So even before students get to TBR, they could be encountering learning support. In 2015, TBR implemented co-requisite remediation at scale across all of our community colleges, placing all students directly into college level math, English, and reading, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with, alongside this additional course designed to provide just-in-time assistance for them. We've seen increases in gateway course completion as a result of these efforts in 2015. That also came up alongside a number of different initiatives. These noticeable increases in math, we've also seen some increases in English too, though they were somewhat less dramatic than what you see here. The reason that we are continuing to pursue this work is because still for more than half of our students require learning support in one or more subject areas. In keeping with the emphasis on equity that we've heard consistently over the past 2 days, our Black and African American student population, over 80%, come in needing learning support, and the outcomes vary widely by student race or ethnicity. These outcomes you see also vary by college, and we've begun to think about how outcomes differ by course modality, especially in light of a shift to our online delivery of these learning support courses in 2020. And in addition to this, after 2015, some of the colleges, as you can see here, have already seen some flattening out of outcomes and gateway course pass rates prior to COVID-19. So that's all just sort of context for where we are and where we're starting from. So for this project, as I said before, we've made strides toward improved student success in the first year, but we recognize there's still a lot of work to be done, especially for our Black and African American student population and for our low-income students. So broadly, our work with Strong Start focuses on refining our existing efforts and hopefully identifying our next phase of reform in Tennessee. So as Jill mentioned, we're focusing a lot on who needs learning support, that placement question. And we have a pilot of the use of high school GPA happening right now. We're also thinking about what level or types of support do they need, and how do we close these equity gaps that we see here. So I'll continue to share more details throughout our discussion, but also happy to answer any questions at the end.
Thank you, Lindsay. And we'll move on to John, please.
So I think I took a little bit of a different approach than my colleagues to kind of share with you the journey that we went on as a system. If we go back to like 2014 or so, 2013, within the California community colleges, and just for context, we serve about 2 to 2.2 million students per year. That's roughly 1 in 8 to 1 in 10 undergraduates in the entire country are in our system in one of our 116 colleges. They're all locally controlled. So most of the work that we do is done through professional development, through training, through support, through those types of things. So often getting the changes we want over time is a slow march of persuasion. So the first step of our work was to really dive into what was happening in developmental education. And in 2013, 2014 or so, we were placing 85% or more of our students below transfer level, or what most systems call college level, in mathematics, about 70% to 75%, depending on the year, below transfer level in English across our entire system. So you can see millions of students are being placed below transfer level. We start looking at that, and what we see is a very large proportion of those students are being forced by us to retake courses that they had successfully completed in high school. Somewhere, depending on exactly which sample we use, somewhere around 3/4 of the students that we assigned to developmental education had to retake one or more courses that they had successfully completed in high school with a C or better. If you bring it back to a B or better, it's about 50%. So we were forcing students who had been successful in high school to retake courses. And so this work leads to the Multiple Measures Project. Big shout out to the folks at the RP group, especially people like Mallory Newell, Craig Hayward, and Terrence Willett that did a lot of this work for years in support of our system. So the first thing we did is we tried to identify students who are highly likely to succeed, students who would be at least as likely to succeed as were already in our courses, right? Our average success rate in a transfer level composition course is right around 70%. In a transfer level math course, it's between about 60 and 65%. And the first thing we saw was there was this huge set of students who we were not giving access to transfer level courses who were very likely to succeed. Basically, B- or better students were very likely to succeed in English, slightly higher GPAs, or possibly getting further in mathematics for entry into entry-level transfer level mathematics courses. And so this helped us move from 85% of students being placed into developmental math somewhere closer to somewhere like 60 to 55% as a system. We were moving to that slowly, but that left a lot of students on the table. And so if I could just advance the slide slightly. So there are a lot of other students, and one of the things we end up focusing on is the students who are least likely to succeed based on their performance in high school. If you could just give me a click to emphasize that. These are students who are generally getting below a C average, not making it very far in mathematics. And so the question we ask is, what is their pathway? What would it look like for them? Where is the most likely way for them to complete a transfer level course? And so if you go to the next slide, we looked really carefully at how this proceeded for students. And so if you took those students who are in the lowest performance in high school and you put them directly in a transfer level course, what their success rates would be. And that's the blue bars, right? So around 40%. It's not great, right? That's a very, very low standard. If we use a variety of different techniques to figure out exactly how likely to be success for controlling all the various things, GPA, assessment tests, and you can see about 40% in English, 30% of students placed directly in from these lowest high school performers would successfully complete a transfer level course on the first try. And then we took those same students and we looked at how likely they would be able to complete a transfer level course if they started one level below. And they were 2/3 less likely to complete. And that totally transformed our perspective on what we were going to do. So if we go to the next slide. What we then do, and one more click, this is the same as before, this changes our placement. So we move away from standardized assessment. Everyone in that highly likely to succeed category gets direct placement. Everyone in the middle category gets hopefully placement with support, but colleges have some discretion about whether or not to provide that support to students or not. And then students in that lowest level category should get placed into the transfer level course with support, but they shouldn't be placed below transfer level. And so that's where we are now, thanks in part to a law that was passed that helped push this a little further along, AB 705. And so you can see the results on the next slide. And what we've seen is a pretty strong progression as we've made these changes. English starts to move a little faster initially, and then math catches up as we get the law passed and more colleges identify. So implement. So we've gone from a system in which we were placing the vast majority of our students into developmental education, forcing them to retake courses that they previously succeeded. And now more than half of our students are completing the transfer level course in both English and mathematics in their first year.
Thanks for that overview, John and Lindsay and Jill. This is really helpful to understand the context that you're all coming from, and the work that you've done is commendable, and it's wonderful to see. And then COVID-19 hit, right? And you know, right around the time we were all in Miami last year having these conversations and celebrating the work. It's hard to think about. That's been a year, but you've had a year, and there's so many things that colleges and universities had to do to adapt. But today we want to talk a bit about how that impacted data collection and what it is that you're doing and what you see or saw. So my first question and I'll pose it to the three of you, and then I'll kind of direct it to each of you in turn. So thinking about your institution or your system's developmental ed and gateway outcomes data, and your ability to monitor these metrics over kind of the time frame of 2020, which is of course when we all had to scramble and do things differently. What trends or patterns were you seeing already in the data and the outcomes from COVID-19 hitting until now, when you're able to see these data? And if Lindsay, you wouldn't mind starting out with answering that question first.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So what we've seen, I think, is pretty consistent with what others have seen or what national trends are showing. Of course, John and Jill jump in here as well. But in fall 2019, as I mentioned, in 2020, sorry, excuse me. As I mentioned before, we shifted our course modality substantially as a result of COVID-19. So most of our courses switched to an online or hybrid model, whereas previously only about a third of our courses were online, and of our learning support courses, almost none were offered in an online format. So our campuses really had to adapt, because in the fall of 2020, almost all of them were taught in this online environment. And this is really the first time we've offered learning support courses in this format. In terms of enrollment, in fall 2020, we saw some declines of about 10% overall over the previous years. And these declines were even steeper for our students of color and low-income students. Specifically, we saw a 20 percentage point decrease in enrollment for Black male students. I say all of this to say that these decreases in enrollment have changed the profile of our incoming class. So we saw fewer low-income students and fewer students of color proportionally. Also, our 2020 class had fewer students with those lower ACT and GPAs over what we saw in 2019. So with all of that in mind, as we've analyzed or begun to analyze our fall 2020 outcomes data, in addition to fewer students enrolling, our early data suggests that even a smaller percentage of those completed gateway courses or were retained to the spring semester. These declines are again especially pronounced for our students of color and low-income students. But we're going to continue to take a look at these, disaggregate these numbers, and assess how these outcomes varied by college and some other student characteristics.
Thanks, Lindsay. It sounds like you've really dug into the data to see what's going on. I appreciate that. Jill, do you have any insights from Suny you want to share on the same topic?
Sure. So similar to what Lindsay suggested, we are too looking at the data both at the campus level and then also at the system level to analyze, overall outcomes. We've experienced some of the very same challenges that Lindsay discussed, and particularly in the way of enrollment, we've seen enrollment declines on our campuses that we've been working with. But at the same time, one of the roles that we've had at system administration is to really try to bring to bear all the different data elements from Suny, but as well as from our partners, to talk about what kinds of things we should be expecting and what kinds of students we should be expecting to receive and what kind of supports they're going to need in the 2021 school year. So just a couple of things that really struck me that we've been sharing with our campuses. If we go back a year and we take a look at the high school population in particular, and where they have been and what the outcomes of the work of the high schools have been to be preparing students to come to Suny, they've just been really phenomenal in the way of the high school students and teachers have done just historic work in terms of working with students to help them to be successful and ready for college in the middle of the pandemic. Last year, at this point, 62% of New York's parents of K-12 students nationally reported that they believe that their children's schools and teachers were using data to help them to make academic progress. So we know that the students coming into us at Suny do have some data-driven results, and that the parents and the students have been pretty satisfied with the work that our high school leaders have been doing to make sure that they've been creating personalized learning opportunities for their students. 94.3% of parents strongly or somewhat agree that they want their students, teachers to use performance data to personalize their experiences. So I think what we're seeing is that the high schools are coming to us with a greater need for more personal approaches to how we can help them to develop the basic math and English skills that they're going to need to be successful in college. As far as what our students are doing in college, we've seen a lot of our students struggle with the transition to online learning. And Lindsay talked a lot about that, how we've really had a transition on a dime to online learning opportunities. So what we did at Suny is we implemented an online student learning index to help the professors and the faculty and also our student support professionals better understand the needs of students and better understand the degree to which they're prepared to actually be successful in the online learning environment. So we were looking more carefully at self-efficacy information, self-regulated learning information, technology access and literacy information, learning environment information, and learning goals of the students. So we could really direct the work that we were doing in the gateway courses, the co-requisite supports, to truly meet the needs of the students that were in our college classrooms. And then we are going to talk a little bit about what we've learned in terms of what the students' needs are, but I would say that the need for holistic student supports as a result of our data has really increased. And we've been doing a lot of work to try to reach students at multiple entry points into our college and then to support them along the way. We can talk about some of those trends and patterns as we continue.
Thanks, Jill. John, anything you want to add from California Community College perspective?
Sure. For us, it's sometimes a little bit more challenging to get a sense of what happens in the system because we are a loosely organized, locally controlled set of colleges. I can tell you, like, we've done some system-wide surveys of students and staff and faculty, and a lot of people focus on, the things that students needed. And I can tell you when we've talked to the students, they mentioned some of those things, like what they've lost, having a quiet place to do schoolwork, right? Many of them don't have that anymore in community college. If you're in a household that's got 3 or 4 other people that are all on Zoom with you, it's hard to learn. They've talked about some problems that they've had with technology, and we've all talked about that nationally. Getting students access to the technology that they have to be able to do the coursework and hotspots so that they have reliable Wi-Fi, all those types of things. But I can tell you the number one thing that students said in our survey was that made this more difficult for them was the faculty struggling with the technology in the classroom. That was their number one ongoing concern. And so we were pretty lucky as a system. We had already been working towards setting up the California Virtual Campus. It's our online education initiative. And so we had in place a lot of the structural elements that we could stand up a lot of training quickly, a lot of architecture quickly that helped mitigate some of the consequences of this. But I think the real challenge that we have is we often think about these things in a student-focused way. What didn't the student have? And I think the real question the real thing that this made visible was the skills that our faculty didn't necessarily have in order to teach in this environment. And so that's one of the things that we've really focused on as a system, is how to provide faculty the support so that they can continue to excel in this new environment that's likely to be ongoing for some time. One of the things we were talking about in the system is that we may be transitioning from a pandemic to an endemic, and that there may be some ongoing version of what we're doing now that is going to continue for some time. And so, mad props to our faculty. They have really leaned heavily into this, and we've watched entire institutions train up across all kinds of different training. I've really been incredibly enthusiastic about new approaches to assessment that get us away from some of the limitations that we may have gotten used to in our classrooms that have been opened up by this new environment, giving faculty the tools to start thinking about how do I have a more cooperative great set of grading standards that aren't so much about me holding the line against some student somewhere getting through when they didn't deserve it, and more about finding the truth of students' capacity and helping them navigate that and demonstrate that. So it's been very exciting for us on that front.
Thanks, John. And I'm conscious of the time. And so if the speakers are comfortable, I want to skip around in the questions just a little and kind of transition based on what John was just talking about and move into a little bit of question 3. And I know understandably policies take often a lot longer to change than practices. Although, depending on the system, sometimes a policy can lead to a change in practice or the other way around. But I'm curious if John mentioned a few there talking about kind of how individual faculty members were changing or Lindsay and Jill, you both talked about that need to just switch to online so quickly and what that looked like. Have any practices specific to DevEd and Gateway pathways changed at any of your systems or the institutions within your systems as a result of COVID that you can touch on? And I'll throw that out to any of the 3 of you, because the answer may be no, and that's okay too.
So I'll go ahead and start. Generally, the answer to that question for us has been no. It's been about how do you take existing course structures and transfer them online. I think there has been some really interesting work at some institutions around how do you think about the possibility that if you have a course support structure, that maybe the course is still synchronous, but the support is asynchronous. So there is some of that local experimentation. I would say the biggest change that we've had is bifurcated. So you can think about these types of stressors as things that bring out character, right? And so for the colleges that were, pretty strongly making this transition to supporting a broader understanding of the capacity of students, they leaned into that and they've continued the work forward. For colleges that had greater doubts, what you've seen is some reintroduction of developmental education. Right, going back to, well, we're really not sure, can students who are unprepared or underprepared or have gaps, can they really handle this transition? And so those doubts have become manifest in how they change their schedules back towards previous methods. And so one of the things we are going to be working on is to try and bring those colleges back into, understanding that the path forward is one in which we embrace the capacity that students have and support them. But that's been one of the big changes, is that this has allowed people to essentially supercharge their doubts and maybe backslide a little bit.
Really good point. And Lindsay, I think you had unmuted yourself there too. Did you have something you wanted to share from Tennessee?
Sure. So the biggest policy change that we've had as a direct result of COVID-19 has been allowing students to use GPA for placement. So previously we were using standardized test scores, ACT, SAT, AccuPlacer, and there was a concern that a number of incoming students would not be able to take the ACT. So that helped us get in this policy recommendation that we had been thinking about and researching for a while. So in March 2020, our board approved a pilot of the use of high school GPA. It's important to note here that this is all still within the context of co-requisite remediation. So all students are still being enrolled in college level courses, but they can bypass that additional course, the co-requisite section, with their high school GPA. I won't get into the details of like our cut scores and everything in the interest of time, But where we are now is that pilot has been extended through spring 2021, and we hope to have it extended even further, taking that to our board pretty soon. Overall, we think our pilot students have fared well in their college level coursework. We've seen broad declines in those pass rates across the board, as I mentioned previously, but our early analysis shows that students who would have been placed in learning support but bypassed it because of their GPA fared pretty well. So that's been the biggest change that we've had. That's been like a real policy, I guess a pilot. It's not technically a policy change yet, but something that's gone before our board and is in place system-wide.
Great example of using data immediately to inform it and see how it's working as well. Jill, you have anything to share from Suny?
Yeah, so in New York, just thinking big picture, we had the highest number of COVID cases, maybe in the country in the very beginning of this crisis. And our chancellor, our new Suny chancellor, Chancellor Jim Malatros, has just done a tremendous job in implementing testing policies across Suny to make sure that we could keep our students, faculty, and leaders safe, and also to make sure that students could have as much on campus coursework and programming as possible. And that's really it's gone a long way to helping our students get the instruction, the coursework that they need. Also coupled with the outstanding efforts that Suny Online has done to really leverage our system to create online opportunities that have really helped us to expand the co-requisite supports we've been able to provide to students. And so holistically, just the testing alone has been just tremendous for getting students the opportunity to stay, studying and engage with peers on our campuses. To follow up on what Lindsay said, for us, multiple measures has just really catapulted in post-COVID-19 or in the midst of COVID-19 in terms of using other indicators than testing to really determine placements. And that's been really embraced, and we've had to use it because of COVID-19, but as a result, we've really been able to capitalize on the power of multiple measures for helping to predict student success. And we were part of the original CCRC study that was showing how we've had success using multiple measures at Suny. So the data has really driven the expansion of the use of multiple measures to help to place students in gateway courses. Also, one of the things that we've really changed a lot with is we've accelerated our commitment to equity. Our board of trustees recently approved a brand new diversity plan for Suny that focuses on diversity and equity in everything we do across all of our campuses. So that's been very powerful. One of the things that we're working on now is campus by campus to look at the key indicators that we've been using to guide this work for a long time, to disaggregate them with a focus on equity. So we'll have an equity report card by campus, which will be incredibly helpful for helping us to make data-informed decisions, be able to do troubleshooting in real time, work on helping to address our equity challenges. So that's a commitment at the highest levels of Suny now, and it's just really very powerful and important across our campuses. And then to take that a step further, another thing we've been able to do is really leverage our partnerships in a way that we've never been able to do that before. So we were hearing from our K-12 and partners, and many of the data show this, that they didn't have enough information coming back to them on, what the career outcomes of students were, what the graduation outcomes were. They don't have enough time to collaborate with our faculty and our colleges to make a seamless pathway. So we've been trying to improve the communications and partnerships we've had with our K-12 leaders, as well as leaders who serve many of our historically underrepresented students. So partners like the United Way and the Urban League and the Hispanic Federation have now been working directly with us hand in hand to try to improve student outcomes and improve the supports that students need when they enter college, and help them to succeed right through completion. So the partners have been essential to our work as well.
Great, thanks for those examples, Jill. And I think you all three highlighted how this pandemic has really opened up opportunities to say, let's try this thing we've been talking about before and see how it works, and use data to really dig in and see if this could be something that we use going forward. And how also sometimes it's really challenging to say, I just have to, I'm a faculty member or whomever I am, I need to do what I'm comfortable with because this pandemic is happening. And so really balancing those things, I think, is critical, and using data to inform those decisions going forward. forward is fantastic. Well, we are out of time. Emily shared with me in a message that we do have 10 minutes before the Zoom shuts down. And so if anybody has a question or wants to talk to one of our panelists, if they don't mind staying for a couple minutes, we can keep this open. We are going into break, I believe, right now, and have a half-an-hour break, because who knows if it's lunchtime or breakfast or brunch or wherever you are, but it's time maybe to grab a drink and a snack, maybe one of the ones that ECS sent us so kindly. So thank you so much to our speakers and for all of you for joining us on this conversation. Have a good break there, and we'll see you back in concurrent sessions at, I think, 12:55 Mountain Time. You'll have to, that's where I am. You'll have to calculate that for you. So thank you, everyone.
I want to thank you so much, everyone, as well. Thank you so much, Gina. And if you do have some questions, you're welcome to stay in this room for a few more minutes, or you're welcome to move on to the next, to taking a little bit of a break. We'll just keep it open here for a few more minutes. I think most of the people have left the room. Francesca, I see that you're still on the line. I don't know if you had a question.
Yeah, I just typed a question in. This is for Jill.
Oh, great.
Is the online student learning index available anywhere to see or reference?
Sure. Yes. You know what? If you can just drop me your email, I can send you like some samples of the survey and give you some. I think one of the things that's been really helpful is the questions that are in the survey, as well as some of the resources that we've used to help to allow faculty an opportunity to talk with students individually about how they can sort of improve their approach to student learning. So yeah, I'd be happy to send you those things as well. I think that the idea of this granular level of data is really important, and then how do you follow up appropriately? So I'm happy to start with you. I just received your email, so thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, everyone. I think that went pretty well. Any quick comments or questions that you want to talk about for just a second before the next session? We have, 30 minutes.